thanks to everyone involved in organising this, and I hope it's just going to be an interesting evening and an interesting day, and that as well as just the talks, but really the important thing is the discussion and the back and forth and finding out what everybody thinks and bouncing it off. And one thing I just think as we go into this is to think about just being very critical. I hope you're very critical about the ideas that are put to you, because there's a lot of ideas about privacy that we have, and there's that come from people like us, and sometimes they don't stand up in the real world in terms of there's all these problems and all these badness, and then people come to a conference like this and they listen for half an hour or 4 hours or whatever, and they nod a lot about how bad the things that are happening, but then they go home and they use Facebook and they use Twitter and they get on their mobile phone and they do all these things. And these things that are supposed to be so bad and so dangerous, but people keep on doing them. And there's a reality has to be dealt with, is that the reason people do it is because they really like it and they find it really convenient, and they have gotten great amenity, as we say in English, from these things that they've changed their lives in a lot of positive ways. There's a lot of good things that have come out of such great things have come out of these technologies, really, just in terms of organizing people, getting access to products, getting access to capital, getting access to education, finding out about things you wouldn't have known about otherwise. These are extraordinary technologies and there are extraordinary benefits, and that's why I say that it's important to be just critical, and because we have to have, it's not just enough to have a debate, we have to have a realistic debate that's going to come up with realistic answers, that is in the world that we actually live in, not the world perhaps that we imagine we live in. The other thing is, I say the talk is, if you look on the program, is the early digital age. The state of the citizen in the early digital age. We are very much. This is something we're very much at the beginning of. We're this is kind of the new normal, and we're only beginning to cope with what it's all about. And towards the end, I'll talk about what I think we need to do to make this work better. And if you like, that's the sort of the point of the presentation, I suppose, the point of our organisation. The other thought is, as Thomas stood there, I was just thinking about the idea of the series in Dublin of Fading Memories, and the interesting thing to think about as we go through all this is that in many ways the internet is a place where nothing is forgotten. That records are made and then they stand for a long time. Things stay around for a long time, and sometimes things that would be better forgotten are there. They're there to be put back to someone. It's like the scene in 1984 where all the person's memories and all the things that they've done over the course of their lives and all the things they feared are there to be put back to them, to be returned to them. And we've all been in a job or a relationship where somebody puts back to you things that happened 2 days ago or a week ago or a month ago or years ago, and how punishing that is. And it's that's part of the context of how much things have changed. Now, I wanted to start to tell you a bit about our little organisation. So we're a very small organisation, on a peripheral island on the edge of Europe. When I say small, we're an all-voluntary organisation. We have no permanent staff. We've been going since 2006. I suppose we're 11 or 12 years on the road now. And the primary thing that we actually do, which is strange for an organisation like this, is we bring legal challenges. As Frederick said, we challenged challenged this law called the Data Retention Directive. This was what we sort of, if you like, made our name for in Europe. So this is a law that applies to the whole of Europe, which requires mobile phone operators and other telecoms operators to record a plethora of information about where you've been and who you've talked to. So all of your phone calls and all of your phone calls and all the locations from which you made the phone calls, and to a degree your internet access, are recorded kept on file, for 2 years, not because you've done anything wrong, but because that information might be useful later in investigating serious crime or protecting national security. And what we did, and it's an interesting thing from the point of view of the internet, is that something like this could never have been organized without the internet. That we were able to come together and the relevant people were able to meet. They were able to put together a plan for moving forward. They were able to get the resources, and we were able to get in contact with the relevant people who were able to help us finance it. And we were able to put this all together kind of on a shoestring, and we were able to move forward. And it's an example of something that could never have been done without the internet. And it's a reminder of the boon this technology has been to us, in terms of, as a society, it allows us to do things that we never thought about doing before. So that's important to remember as we think about all the bad things, because we're going to mostly talk about bad things today. Of the internet. So we brought that case, that's where the picture is there, to the Court of Justice, the case in relation to the data retention law, and they found it was illegal. And the reason they said it was illegal was because it was disproportionate, that you can't just store data about people just because you can, and just because it might be useful later. It's just too much of an infringement on their rights. They didn't say it would never be possible, but the reality is there is no war in Europe. There is no massive terrorist threat. If there was, maybe things would be different. But as things are, they said that was not to be. So to talk about the sort of the themes we talked about, the idea of. The idea was originally with the internet, and it was like us, like our little group of people who put together to do something good. The internet, this is what it would be good for. It would result in emergent democracy. So what was called emergent democracy in a famous paper. So a man, Joey Ito. So Joey now runs the media lab in Massachusetts in MIT, and Joey, who I know for years and years, Joey had a beautiful idea for the future of the internet, that it was going to allow us to evolve from our kind of our democratic system that we have at the moment, where we elect our representatives, a representative democracy, and they have to go off and they do all the work of governing, and we just kind of hang around and we kind of complain if they do too bad a job, but we're not really that involved, to a situation where we'd be participating in that democracy. And we would all be involved in the debate, and we'd all get to give our opinion, and we'd come up with the best solution for the society. And this was very much as well the idea you see with Twitter, what people like about Twitter, the debate, the discussion, it's the back and forth, that there's a deeper social engagement, that this is what comes out of that this is what should come out of all of these online media. And for a while it was like that, that you had this kind of friendly place where ideas could be discussed. As things turned out in the last couple of years, it hasn't exactly worked out like that, and we have to look at why that happened. It's also in terms of, as that was the citizen side. Our role as a person in a democracy, in our society. How we govern ourselves. But as consumers, it also it changed what we were doing. And consumer in the sense of our commercial lives. That we're commercial people. We have to go and buy. Whether we buy just food or whether we buy things for our house or whatever it is, we're active in terms of shaping our environment and getting the things that we need. And it gave us just extraordinary new horizons in terms of, Linux was all about an operating system. It didn't come from Microsoft or from Apple. The people made Linux. Same with Wikipedia. The people made Wikipedia. It's something that emerged, something that came, not something that was imposed from above or came from a big company. The concept of the maker movement, people making things for themselves, fixing things instead of just buying new stuff all the time. the idea of the reason Amazon is there is because it opened what was traditionally a monopoly. You had to buy stuff from the local place. That was, that was what you had access to. You couldn't buy from a long distance away. You didn't have enough information. You couldn't trust the vendors in Hong Kong or whatever it was. Now you had access to all of these things, and this was and is an extraordinary boon. The YouTube is there because you could make your own videos and you could be your own TV station with YouTube. You no longer had to accept the news as it was. You could also learn things from YouTube as if you wanted to learn a new technique for playing music or for plastering or whatever it is. It's all there on YouTube, and these are an extraordinary boon, an extraordinary benefit to people, and that should be acknowledged. The problem is that you can take it on that set of values. You can just take it as it is. You can, to go back to the, it looks like I imagine everybody here remembers the film The Matrix, which is basically, if you look at it now, just the ideas of it seem more and more relevant. That there's the world we see, but that there's an underlying world that's hidden, that there's a whole dimension, there's a whole dimension going on that we don't really understand, and to some extent that we choose to ignore. And Neo has to decide: is he going to swallow the red pill or the blue pill, and is he going to look into what's really going on behind what the dark side of the life he enjoys really consists of? And of course, what he finds out is that he's not really a consumer. He's not really a person who's active in his own life. He's just a person. He's a product. He's being used as part of a battery, part of a bigger system. His life is for somebody else's benefit. He thinks he's living his life, but in fact his life is being lived for him. He's not really in control of his own destiny. What he lives in is an illusion. And to some extent, this is what's happened on the internet in terms of consumers, is that while we feel like we're going around and choosing our own products and choosing our own destiny and deciding what we're going to look at on the internet and what we're going to buy and so on, the reality is that it's being shaped. So this big slide here is this big graphic is it's a kind of a diagram as a guide to the online data marketplace. So there's data brokers out there trading information about you. So the advertising that you see when you go on Facebook or on Google, the advertising is directed based on information they have built up. They have built up over time about you, what kind of person you are, what age you are, what kind of things you're interested in, what you've browsed before, what products you've looked at in the past, and so on. And that's being used in a very systematic way. It's a sort of a behavioral analysis. It's like B.F. Skinner. It's being used to shape your behavior. It's to get you to look at certain web pages, to consider buying particular products, to nag you, to push you. And in a lot of ways, you don't notice it. It's hard to notice that this is going on. Sometimes it's blatant. That you see an advertisement for something that you've looked at on Amazon or whatever it is a day before or 2 days before. But sometimes it's much more subtle. Stuff is thrown at you about things that you were interested in a year ago or 2 years ago. And sometimes you notice them, but there's stuff going on that you don't really even understand, because these systems, and we'll talk more about the algorithms and everything, they're building up this model of you. They have this understanding of you, which is how you can argue about how deep it is, but it seems somehow sinister. It's something under the radar that we don't know about, that we don't understand. We're being manipulated. We're being made to do something. Somebody wants us to buy something, and the information that we have provided, like the man in 1984, the information is being used now to make us do things that we might not otherwise have done. Now, this is not completely new. We've always been shaped by our environment, but we've never been shaped in such a relentless, personalized, targeted way as we are with these tools and these systems, and we have to wonder about that. And finally, the citizen, the citizen as product dimension. So, that was the commercial side. Great, they get us to buy something that we didn't want, or a car that is more expensive than we really need. There's lots of environmental issues with that, but basically, what does it really? Maybe that's not that important. But what's happening is that our opinion as citizens, and ultimately our most fundamental duty, which is to vote, that is up for manipulation. This has clearly been manipulated we've seen this manipulated in the last couple of years by all sorts of parties. And basically what's happening is that all of the positive, what we thought were the positive aspects of emergent democracy and being able to participate are being manipulated, because you have this system that's so open and that anybody can participate in. And what's happening is that everybody is participating in it, and some of them are participating 5, 10, 20, 100 or 1 million times, to create an opinion and to whip up a situation that wouldn't necessarily happen otherwise. And so an example of this is from the US is, it's a very simple technique that's used, is to depress the vote. So for example, to get a group of people, typically black people, not to vote, get them to stay at home, you just have to target this group of people and convince them that it's not worth voting for Hillary Clinton. You have to tell them they're all the same, politicians are all the same. Then they don't bother to go out to vote, and you've only made a small nudge, but you've nudged the right people, and you get an enormous effect within the democratic system. And this is the reality that we're dealing with. That we're in this system where it's like the scene in the Batman movie. Everything can be seen. Everything is known, and of course the problem is the power isn't equal. Some people know more stuff than others. Some people have more control over the information. Than other people, and those people ultimately end up with the power. So, I showed you the previous slide with all this stuff on the bottom left. Now, but all of these players in the data broking business, but there is a reality. They have reality. Those people have problems too, and their problem is Facebook and Google are hoovering up a lot of that. So you have a very small number of organizations that are controlling an immense amount of information, and then again, the data retention is about the government. It's another power center, and they're trying to build up their information. They don't necessarily sit around and mean to do it, but the nature of bureaucracies is that they try and draw power to themselves, and they want to remain powerful. And this is one of the ways that they do it. So how is this going to be dealt with? What is the future of this? This is very pessimistic compared to where we started. But the way we're going to deal with it really as a society is the way we dealt with other revolutions in the past. We had motorized road transport. That was a problem that, at the beginning, no one could figure out how it was going to work. You had motorized vehicles that could go 10, 20, 30, 40 miles per hour at the time, and this just seemed extremely dangerous, that these would be sharing the same road space as people. People were walking, or horses, and all of the other things that had to use the road. But I suppose, and we have the same in lots of other industries. But in the road business, basically the answer was that we had to have rules of the road. We had to have guidelines. There's a system, and part of it is legal. That there's just laws that you have to obey. You must do certain things, and some of it then is kind of courtesy, sort of. The unwritten rules of the road, when you give way, the eye contact with the other passengers, all of the other steps that you take to make sure that this happens. And that's the reason, if you like, that we do what we do. That's our relevance, is that the force of law really has to be updated to protect people in this digital world. That it has to be relevant, and it has to primarily protect citizens. So that means just the legal system and all of the other systems, policing and so on, they have to engage properly with the digital world to make sure that the citizen is protected, and these aren't just systems of oppression. And for a little organization like ours, as I said, they call us a civil rights organization or a human rights organization. But the reality is we aren't really, because our organization is so small and so powerless, we can do very little to protect people's rights. So we need the real protectors of civil rights and human rights are the ones we often portray as the breakers of them. You know, the police, intelligence services, governments, they're the people who are supposed to be doing the job of protecting our rights. And the law has to change so they actually do what they're supposed to do and protect the citizen. And so that's why we do what we do, and that's why the internet kind of can't regulate itself. You know, we have to think carefully about how it's regulated and how we develop it and how we control it. So, kind of that's where I'll leave it with you. That it's that's the step we're at. We're at the point where we have to make that decision about how we're going to regulate the internet, or how we're going to make the internet work, not just through legal regulation, but all the other types of tacit regulation that go on, so that it actually protects citizens, so that it doesn't just become a domain of big players, something that something that's a control mechanism. And I would say that privacy, which is kind of where we started our discussion, that is one of the key levers for that. It's our understanding of privacy and how we protect privacy. How that is done is at the heart of how we prepare to continue through the digital age. Okay, thank you.